We are on board the Aegean Odyssey. Its specialty is cruising the coastal waters of the Mediterranean. Classified as a mid-sized ship, it is able to visit ports that are too small for larger vessels, and in particular, able to navigate around the scenic islands of the Adriatic and Mediterranean. Lord Byron called this majestic walled city the Pearl of the Adriatic, and it is easy to see why. UNESCO has labelled it the best preserved walled city in the Mediterranean, with its beautiful seafront setting and dramatic mountain backdrop. In the ship's Charleston Lounge, Cruise Director Paul Carter calls the various groups when it is time for them to board the tenders, and we have our little whispers plugged in and ready for our local guides. The Republic of Dubrovnik was founded by Croatians in the 7th century, and for 500 years from 1358 it was a powerful independent republic. Perhaps the most famous city in Croatia, the population of Dubrovnik is only about 30,000, but it is the cultural and social heart of the region. The city's main street, the Stradun or Placa, is only about 300 metres long. It was once a sea channel connecting two ancient settlements. That is until the 11th century, when it was filled in. The name Stradun is a Venetian word meaning, ironically, big street. It is the widest and most beautiful street in the city and divides it into the northern and southern halves. At the same time, it is the shortest route between the eastern and western city gates. The city is an inspiration and self-resurrection. Despite a destructive earthquake in 1667 and civil wars in between, the people of Dubrovnik have managed to preserve its beautiful Renaissance churches, monasteries and palaces. A medley of Gothic and Baroque buildings and massive 10th century walls. Luza Square, at one end of the Stradun, is a favourite promenade and gathering place. The 31-metre high city bell tower and clock was built in 1444. A famous local foundry cast the bell in 1509. The bell strikes on the hour and on the half hour. Built in 1522 and rebuilt after the 1667 earthquake, the Sponza Palace is an important building on Luza Square. It was once the home of a number of state offices, including the Treasury and the Armoury. Also on Luza Square stands a stone column with a small platform on the top, once used for public proclamations. On its front is carved the form of an ancient knight. The knight is Orlando, and the column was erected in 1419 as a symbol of the city's sovereignty and freedom amid the hostility of neighbouring powers. Although Orlando columns are common in Europe, he was actually a knight called Roland, who served the Emperor Charlemagne, the Frankish emperor, who unified much of Europe. He is still used as a symbol of the city and plays a prominent part in the opening and closing ceremony of the Dubrovnik Summer Festival. Between the town hall and the cathedral is the Rector's Palace, a particularly outstanding monument to Baroque architecture. Heavily damaged in history by fires, gunpowder explosions and earthquakes, each subsequent architect has left his mark during partial or total reconstruction. It now stands in glorious Gothic, Renaissance and Baroque harmony. Once the Palace of the Rector, or the town's chief magistrate, it is now a museum. The story of Dubrovnik's cathedral is fascinating. According to legend, Richard the Lionheart, while returning from the Crusades in 1192, was shipwrecked nearby in a storm. In order to thank God for his life, he decided to build a great church right here. Unfortunately, this first of three Dubrovnik cathedrals, built between the 12th and 14th centuries, crumbled to dust in the great earthquake of 1667, and, although Dubrovnik recovered slowly and with difficulty, soon the new Baroque-style church of St. Blaise rose from the rubble. In 1981, when the present Cathedral of Annunciation of St. Mary underwent renovations, this time because of the 1979 earthquake, experts discovered King Richard's old Romanistic cathedral under the foundations. The Dubrovnik Cathedral is known for the beautiful polyptych behind the main altar. Called the Annunciation of Mary, this three-leaved altarpiece is attributed to the 16th century Italian painter Titian. In an alcove stands the icon of Our Lady of the Port, a priceless artefact. She is charged with keeping seamen safe while at sea. Local seamen and their families pray to this altar, and the icon has been carried in Dubrovnik's religious processions since the 15th century. With a large dome decorating the roof, the Church of St. Blaise, better known today as the Cathedral of the Annunciation of St. Mary, was modelled on the Church of St. Mauritius in Venice. It is interesting to note that many of the statues and other valuables on display in the church were undamaged in the great earthquake, and later in the fire that destroyed the remains of the old church. This was interpreted as a sign and a miracle. Dubrovnik Cathedral Treasury contains 182 relics. The most famous of these are the head, arm and leg of Dubrovnik's patron, St. Blaise. The treasury is one of the richest in the Adriatic coast. More than 5,000 citizens were killed in the 1667 Great Earthquake, and many more have died in local wars since, including the siege of Dubrovnik by Yugoslavia in 1991. One of the most beautiful and harmonious cities of the Mediterranean, vanished in ruins and fires that ravaged the city for days. The Baroque-style houses, many of the same appearance and design, make them perfect for the many film companies producing period dramas and wanting to use the city as a backdrop. The American cable television company HBO used Dubrovnik as a backdrop for their smash hit Game of Thrones, renaming the city King's Landing and making these steps internationally famous. Gundulic Square is located at the end of Wells Street. Created as a consequence of the Great Earthquake, today it is home to the statue of Dubrovnik poet and playwright Ivan Gundulic, and, on the corner of a building, Mr. Amerling's Fountain. Gundulic Square is famous for its farmers' market. Starting at around 7 a.m, it is the place to buy fruit and veg, milk, cheese, eggs or nuts from local growers. Born in 1589 and educated here in Dubrovnik, Ivan Gundulic rose to fame as a nobleman, intellect and poet. He served on the Dubrovnik Great Council and was twice elected as Rector. Once upon a time, ships used to bring fresh water to the city. That was until 1436, when the Great Council constructed an 11-kilometre-long aqueduct system. When the aqueduct was completed, a prominent citizen named Onofriou de la Cava built a couple of fountains. This one is the large one. On each of the 16 sides is a unique stone masked face with a faucet projecting out of its mouth, and, take it from me, the water was absolutely beautiful. Repaired several times since the Great Earthquake, the cupola once had a dragon statue on top, but not anymore. The picturesque diversity of Dubrovnik's laneways and narrow streets are part of a unified construction plan of the Baroque-style stone houses built after the 1665 earthquake. This neat and uniform look is a trademark and one of the biggest charms of Dubrovnik today. Dubrovnik's Dominican monks established their monastery in 1225. The church next door took a little longer and was finally completed in the 14th century. It would be another 100 years before the monastery and the church would acquire the final shape we see today. In the middle of the inside courtyard is a richly decorated stone-crowned well. The area is like a green oasis under the summer sun, and the green vegetation gives a soothing and refreshing feel, almost like the midsummer breeze off the sea. The beautiful porches of the cloister were built in the middle of the 15th century. The cloister arches are closed with beautiful Gothic and Renaissance styled triforiums. The special treasure of this monastery is the rich art and artifacts collection, and here on show are some very early altarpieces. Many of the paintings are from the Dubrovnik School of Art of the 15th and 16th centuries, and this piece, from around 1512, is called the Triptych of St. Nicholas. The library is a rich archive with precious illuminated documents and manuscripts. The small, richly decorated church of St. Sebastijan next door was built in 1466. One of its most prominent features is the beautiful statue of St. Mary and the Christ child Jesus. The architectural design is hall-like, with the apse separated by 3 Gothic arched openings. However, the most notable piece is the large 14th century golden crucifix in the central arch above the main altar. In the corners of the crucifix are, symbolically, the 4 evangelists, and below the characters of Mary and Joseph. Built near the Placa gate, the 15th century St. Sebastijan chapel is an architectural gem. Hand-carved by local craftsmen, it is well worth a visit when you next visit this amazing ancient city. Built between the 13th and 17th century and serving as a fortification system for defence, Dubrovnik city wall is 1,940 metres long. The walls are the most important feature of Dubrovnik, the white stone an iconic symbol of the beauty and perhaps the reason why Dubrovnik is known today as the Pearl of the Adriatic. Dressed in traditional costume, this craftswoman has also been a feature of this part of the old town, serving tourists and townsfolk alike with her beautiful craft and needlework. The unmistakable appearance of Dubrovnik is unlike any other city. With their painted saints and Blaise looking down from every nook, they have retained their medieval walls so perfectly. Perhaps that is why Dubrovnik was included in the UNESCO World Heritage List from as far back as 1970.